The snow fell softly that Christmas Eve, coating the city streets, in a blanket of white that muffled the usual sounds of traffic and hustle. Margaret Chen sat alone at the bus stop, her worn cardigan wrapped tightly around her thin frame. At 62, she had learned that life doesn't always go according to plan. The bench was cold beneath her, but she barely noticed anymore. Her fingers clutched a $10 bill, all that remained until her next disability. Check arrived after the holiday. It was enough for the bus fare home and maybe a can of soup. Nothing more, nothing less. Margaret had worked as a seamstress for 40 years before arthritis twisted her hands into shapes that could no longer thread a needle. Her husband, Thomas, had passed 3 winters ago, leaving behind memories and medical bills. Their daughter lived across the country now, busy with her own family. Margaret understood. That's what children do. They build their own lives. She didn't want to be a burden. The bus shelter offered little protection from the bitter wind. Margaret watched the snowflakes dance under the streetlights, each one unique and temporary, like moments in a life. That's when she noticed him. A man stood a few feet away, shivering violently in the falling snow. He wore a suit, a nice one, she noticed, though it was soaked through. His dark hair was slicked back, wet from the snow, and his whole body trembled with cold. He looked to be in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. Strong build, broad shoulders, but right now he looked utterly defeated. "Excuse me," his voice broke through the quiet. "I'm so sorry to bother you. My car broke down about 2 miles back. I've been walking, trying to find help. My phone died and I know this sounds terrible, but do you have any change? Just enough for a bus fare? I can pay you back. I promise I can pay you back." His teeth chattered as he spoke. Margaret could see he was telling the truth. There was genuine desperation in his eyes, but also embarrassment. She knew that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror often enough. She looked down at her $10 bill. Her last $10. For a moment, she calculated. The next bus wouldn't come for another 20 minutes. She could walk the 2 miles home if she had to. Her knees would ache something fierce tomorrow, but she'd survive. She always had. "Here," Margaret said softly, holding out the bill. "Take it. Get yourself warm." The man stared at the money, then at her. "I can't take that." "That looks like—" "Is that all you have?" Margaret smiled, a real smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Young man, I've lived through recessions, losses, and more lonely nights than I can count. What I've learned is this. Money comes and goes, but the chance to help someone, really help them, that's rarer than you'd think. Take it, please." His eyes glistened, and for a moment she thought he might cry. "Thank you," he whispered, taking the bill with shaking hands. "Thank you so much. Can I have your name? Your address? I want to repay you. Margaret Chen, but don't worry about repaying me. Just help someone else someday when you can." He nodded, clutching the money like it was a lifeline. "I'm Daniel Morrison, and I promise you, Mrs. Chen, I will never forget this." He turned and hurried down the street toward the next bus stop, and Margaret settled back on the bench, pulling her cardigan tighter. The cold seemed to seep deeper now, but there was a warmth in her chest that hadn't been there before. She would walk home. It would be all right. But 15 minutes later, as Margaret stood to begin her trek through the snow, a long black limousine pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and there was Daniel, now wrapped in a blanket, holding a steaming cup of something hot. "Mrs. Chen?" he called out. "Please get in. Let me at least give you a ride home." "Oh, I couldn't." "Please." His voice was gentle but insistent. "It's Christmas Eve. You just gave me everything you had. The very least I can do is make sure you get home safely." Something in his tone made her agree. The driver, an older gentleman with kind eyes, opened the door and helped her inside. The warmth of the car enveloped her like an embrace. Daniel handed her the cup, hot chocolate, rich and sweet. "I called my assistant," he explained. "She was still at the office, thank goodness. She picked me up and brought me back to find you." As they drove through the snowy streets, Daniel asked where she lived. Margaret gave the address of her small apartment across town, embarrassed by its modesty. "Mrs. Chen," Daniel said quietly, "can I ask you something? Why did you do it? Why did you give me your last $10? Margaret sipped the chocolate, feeling it warm her from the inside out. "My husband used to say that we're all just walking each other home. Some days you need help. Some days you give it. That's all there is to it, really." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. My father used to say something similar. He passed away last year. He built his company from nothing, always believed in helping people. I've been so focused on keeping that company running, on deals and deadlines, that I forgot what he really taught me. He paused. My car didn't just break down tonight, Mrs. Chen. I was driving to close a business deal, a Christmas Eve deal. If you can believe it, I was so caught up in it that I didn't notice the engine overheating until it died. And then my phone died. And I was standing in the snow, completely helpless for the first time in years. Sometimes we need to be helpless, Margaret said softly, to remember we're human. The limousine pulled up to her building, a modest complex with faded paint and flickering lights in the hallway. Daniel looked at her with something like wonder in his eyes. Mrs. Chen, please. He reached into his coat and pulled out his wallet. No, she said firmly. I didn't give you that money expecting anything back. I know, but please let me do something. It's Christmas Eve. Do you have family plans? Margaret smiled sadly. My daughter's in California. We'll talk on the phone tomorrow. I'll be just fine. Daniel glanced at the woman sitting in the front seat, his assistant. Margaret realized. They exchanged a look that seemed to communicate volumes. Mrs. Chen, the woman said, turning around with a warm smile. My name is Patricia. I've worked with Mr. Morrison for 10 years. His father was one of the kindest men I ever knew. And I can tell you right now, he would not let you spend Christmas Eve alone after what you did tonight. Oh, I really couldn't. You could, Daniel said gently. My mother is hosting dinner at our family home. She always makes enough food for an army, and she always says the table feels too empty now that Dad's gone. Would you join us, please? It would mean the world to me. To us. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. How long had it been since someone invited her to anything? Since she felt wanted? I'm not dressed for... You're perfect exactly as you are, Daniel insisted. And so, on that snowy Christmas Eve, Margaret Chen found herself in a beautiful home filled with warmth and laughter. Daniel's mother, Eleanor, was a gracious woman in her 70s who hugged Margaret like they were old friends. The table was indeed laden with more food than seemed possible. Roasted turkey, honey-glazed ham, dishes that steamed and smelled of comfort and tradition. Over dinner, Margaret learned that Daniel ran his late father's construction company, which specialized in building affordable housing. His father had started as a carpenter and never forgot his roots. He used to say, Eleanor shared, her eyes distant with memory, that a home isn't just walls and a roof. It's dignity. It's hope. Margaret told them about her years as a seamstress, about Thomas, about the life they'd built together stitch by stitch. She told them about her daughter and grandchildren she saw only in photos. As the evening wore on, Daniel grew quiet. Finally, he spoke. Mrs. Chen, I want to tell you something. That business deal I was rushing to tonight, it was to sell one of my father's properties, a small apartment complex, to a developer who planned to tear it down and build luxury condos. I told myself it was just business. Good money. He paused, his jaw tightening. But meeting you tonight, you reminded me why my father built that place. It houses people like you, good people who've worked hard their whole lives and just need a safe, affordable place to call home. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed her son's hand. I'm not selling it, Daniel continued. And more than that, I want to do something. Mrs. Chen, which unit do you live in? Margaret told him, confused. Daniel pulled out his phone and pulled up some files. His expression changed. Your building. My company owns your building. I inherited it from Dad. I've been so busy with the larger projects that I let a management company handle it, but... He scrolled through inspection reports, his face darkening. These repairs that were requested, they were never done. The heating system, the hallway lights, the security door. It's all right, Margaret said quickly. I manage. It's not all right. Daniel's voice was firm but not angry. My father would be ashamed. I'm ashamed. Mrs. Chen, those repairs will be done, all of them, starting next week. But the holiday, I'll pay overtime. It matters. As the evening drew to a close, Daniel insisted on driving Margaret home. But when they arrived, he handed her an envelope. Please don't open it until I leave, he said. And please don't argue. You gave me something priceless tonight. You reminded me who I'm supposed to be, who my father raised me to be. Back in her apartment, Margaret carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a check. The check made her gasp. It was for $10,000. But it was the letter that made her cry. Dear Mrs. Chen, my father used to tell me that angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they have worn cardigans and sit at bus stops. Tonight you were my angel. This isn't charity. This is gratitude. You gave me everything you had when I needed it most, and in doing so, you gave me something even more valuable, perspective. Please accept this gift in the spirit it's given, and please call the number below anytime you need anything. You'll always have a seat at our family table. With deepest gratitude and respect, Daniel Morrison. Margaret sat in her small apartment. The letter clutched in her trembling hands, and she wept. But they were good tears, the kind that wash away loneliness and water the seeds of hope. That Christmas, Margaret learned that sometimes when you give everything you have, you receive more than you ever imagined. Not because you expect it, but because kindness has a way of rippling outward, touching hearts and changing lives in ways we can never predict. And sometimes, just sometimes, it comes back to you on a snowy Christmas Eve, wrapped in warmth and carried home in a limousine, reminding you that you're never really alone. Not when there are still people in the world, willing to see each other's humanity through the cold. Margaret fell asleep that night with a smile on her face, the snow still falling softly outside her window, blanketing the city in quiet grace.